Everybody, thanks so much for joining us in our conversation today. We're going to give everybody a minute or two to sort of filter in here. And while we wait for folks to join, I'd love to see where people are dialing in from. Please feel free to leave your city, your state, your country in the chat. It's always fun to see where folks are coming from, and also if we have any familiar names out there. Kansas City, Dallas, all right. North Texas. We got Dallas and we got North Texas. Hello from Taxes. Leslie.
Texas.
There you go. Texas, which is known for being a state with no tax, right? Wow, we have so many people from Texas. I love it. New Mexico, Melbourne, of course, Bay Area. Amazing. Las Vegas. And while this is firing up, I'm going to attempt to share my screen as well. I'm going to caveat this discussion by saying we're using a new webinar platform. I know many folks here, no Canadians yet. Sorry, Jeff. I'm sure somebody will join who's from Canada. Many of you have been on our past webinars, and we typically use Zoom. We are now using, yes, Meredith. We got a Canadian. At least she's being very nice and saying she's from Canada. We're using Webinar Geek, which I'm super excited about as a platform. Have any feedback, let us know in the chat, or we have a feedback poll at the end of this. And basically, Zoom's great. Hopefully this will be better. And as most folks know, we do webinars on a fairly regular basis. And so really want to have the best platform to continue to deliver a really impactful product to everybody out there that is part of our community. So today's session is all about a really tough but important part of modern HR, which is getting leadership buy-in for new HR tools, and specifically a new HRIS. Although I think much of what we talked about today will be relevant if you're looking for a full HCM, a payroll, an ETS, performance management, LMS, etc. We'll be digging into why teams get stuck with outdated systems, how to build a strong business case, and what it actually takes to get approval from the C-suite. My name is Phil Struzula. I'm the founder of SSR. If we haven't met previously, our mission is to help HR professionals find and buy the right software. So around 100,000 companies a month use our reviews about everything from payroll to HRIS to HCM to EOR, PEO, you name it, to figure out what tools they should buy. And then we also have this really amazing offering where you can talk one-on-one with somebody on our team, one of our advisors, and get bespoke recommendations for your company, your integrations, your problems. We'll even help basically be a concierge, help you figure out pricing, internal stakeholder management, all that stuff. The best part is it's totally free. And we have a 4.9 star rating, probably in large part because it's free. And we add a lot of value throughout that process. We'll have a little bit more information about it later on. We actually have a special giveaway for anybody who wants to take advantage of it later in this session as well. I also want to introduce two amazing guys here to share their knowledge with us today. So Jeff is the founder of Scale HR, where he helps HR recruiting and work tech startups and SMBs grow their brand and impact. He's got 25 years of experience in HR leadership and entrepreneurship, and he blends both ideas with real-world practicality. He's also the brains behind Social HR Camp, a global event series where HR pros dive into the future of work. And he also just informed me that he has recorded 40 podcast episodes in the last few days. And so my guess is he's launching a podcast. So welcome, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bob is a seasoned HR executive, international employment lawyer. He's an HR professor, and he's an HR tech advisor and investor with 30 years of experience in our space. He's successfully executed over 42 HR technology implementations. Again, I think that's the record that I've heard of. I'm not sure if anybody out there can beat it. Anybody in the chat wants to weigh in and say, hey, I got 43. Please feel free to upstage Bob. I'm sure he won't mind. That cover everything from ERP, HRIS, ATS, LMS, AI, analytics. He brings a rare combination of evidence and database, HR expertise, legal knowledge, and customer-centric technology deployment and acumen. So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to learning from both of you guys. This session is being recorded. This session is also eligible for one HRCI credit or one SHRM credit. We'll send that information out to everyone who's eligible after this talk. We're going to have, sorry, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen to give you a sense for the agenda here. We are going to have a couple of key parts of this. So in terms of insights that I want everybody to take away out of this conversation, signs your HRIS is holding you and your team back, the real cost of sticking with misaligned or outdated software, why leadership resists change, and how to understand their concerns and convince them that the next step is to buy a new HRIS. HRIS pricing explained, and then also going through ROI business case. We're also going to have a $50 gift card offer later in the session, SHRM HRCI credits. We're going to have live networking. That's one of the best parts of these sessions in about 30 minutes. Please hold off on sharing your LinkedIn URLs in the meantime, because sometimes that can get distracting. We'll have a dedicated time. Everybody interested in this topic can share their LinkedIn URLs and network with each other. We'll have Q&A, and then we'll also be sending everybody a document after this to kind of just encapsulate all the different resources and everything. I'm also going to launch a poll right now, asking people here just kind of where you're at, what problems are you experiencing when pitching HR tools internally, so that we can tailor this conversation. And I guess, as we're getting that data back, leadership doesn't see the value. All right. That's in the lead for sure. Budget gets shut down, kind of, probably some overlap there in the Venn diagrams. Migration is risky. Please keep answering. We love to get this feedback. More leaderships. Amazing. Thank you guys so much for answering these questions. And the last answer here added to the chat, please feel free throughout this conversation to keep the chat active. Add your questions, add your insights, your stories. And again, we'll have that dedicated networking session coming up in about 30 minutes. So wanted to kick up the conversation, Jeff and Bob. Bob, maybe you can go first, just because I want to steer the conversation. Why is leadership apprehensive in the first place about investing in a new HRIS?
Yeah, it's a great question, Phil, and it comes down to the fundamental aspect and what what I refer to as the language gap. Language in the sense of, we have HR folks, many of which have MBAs, right, and understand the language of business and so on, but are a little bit siloed in the sense that, if we do this, it'll help HR. And you have the executives going, well, I've got bigger problems, and I'm looking for these kind of outcomes, and there's a little bit of a gap there between the two. And so it's been, I think it's incumbent on some of the folks, within the HR community to have a look and say, okay, what can I do to start bridging that gap? And looking at, the CEO or senior leadership team's pain points, and then how do I quantify how, what type of impact an HRIS can have on their pain points, or it should be our pain points, together. And, just breaking it down in terms of different types of organization, what pain they're feeling, and taking those. And I'll give you one specific example. If I drill down, right, and say you want an all-in-one HRIS, and, it includes a recruitment piece. Well, one of those areas, could be related to, we've got the general time to fill, criteria, KPI, but what is the business part of it, right? So if you look at that, they'll say, okay, well, the longer we don't fill a position, we lose sales, we lose credibility with our customers. What if we quantify that impact, right? The longer we don't fill a position, what does that cost us as a company? And if you think about it, it's quite high, right? If you got average revenue per employee versus the salary you're saving, but you multiply that out times days, right? So if your industry, its average is 45 days to hire somebody, but you're at 75, 80, there's a huge cost And I will bet you from one position, you could basically justify the cost of upgrading your HRIS. So this is what I'm talking about, is bridging that gap between the language used and then focusing a little bit more on the senior leadership team exec side.
Love it. Jeff, how about you? What do you see as kind of the key friction points?
Yeah, I totally agree with Bob. I would just want to add, two things. One is, as a former HR leader, one of the things that I really did was make sure that my HR strategy was dead set. And the reason for that is because you want to connect the business strategy, to what you're doing from a people standpoint. And so if the business is asking you to do A, B, and C, and you've actually agreed to that, and then you say, okay, so I need tools to help me do A, B, and C, and they're saying, well, no, then you say, well, then I can't, do A, B, and C, right? So we're going to have to backtrack on that. And so, and the senior leadership group might say, well, no. We want to do A, B, and C. So therefore, we're going to have to invest in it. So that's just one way that I really make sure that, when you're having those conversations, that you're leaning on those actual strategy documents, because those are actually very, very important. And a lot of my peers, and especially in smaller companies, don't do that. They don't even talk about that. They don't have a proper strategy in place, or plan. The other thing too is around, very specific numbers. But HR, generally speaking, we've not been great at that. But to Bob's point is, especially nowadays, now with like AI power, workflow automations, and you can drastically cut down on the amount of time that it takes to do something by 90%, right? And so you can easily sort of attach some of those metrics to the existing HRIS or other tools that are sucking up manual entries and workarounds and double entries and all of this kind of stuff. The other thing too is around the actual experience, right? And so so when you have employees that are actively engaged with the work software, we all know that has a positive influence on things like employee engagement, outputs, productivity. So those are just some of the things that came to mind.
The nice thing is, I always used to recommend, from a business case perspective, Bob, to your point, a lot of people have an MBA. They have this sort of like business analytical mind. Some people don't. And I would always say, find the person in your organization who does, and, buy them dinner or something like that, and have them help you build that business case. But you can actually go to ChatGPT these days and say, hey, here's the type of company we are. Here's the pain that we're experiencing. Here's why I think we need a new system. Can you help me build a base case ROI calculator? And it can even, give you a spreadsheet that you can download. I'm wondering what some of those pain points are. Like, how do you start to realize, hey, this HRIS is really dragging us down and we need to get a new system in here?
Yeah, so from the, breaking it down, as Jeff and I mentioned, and you did as well, Phil, is, looking at from the leadership point of view, what are their priorities and what's keeping them awake at night, so to speak. So you can go, up and down the employee life cycle, so to speak, right? Is it branding? Is it, all those elements? Let's pick one. Let's pick performance management. There we go. Let's just dive right into it. And, we could say, okay, we're kind of old school. We do performance reviews once a year, or we kind of going down a journey of continuous performance management. But there's the expectation of certain outcomes related to that, right? So we've got, higher productivity, we've got lower attrition, and all these types of things. Are you meeting those criteria? And while you may have the best intention, and maybe when you launched it, a PowerPoint and email was good enough, but then there's the continuity aspect. And does the tool that you have support that continuity? Because, there's an old saying, I think it's James Clear, who said, you don't rise to the level of your motivation, you fall to the level of your systems. And part of that system isn't just the process that you've created for yourself, but the underlying HR tech, for example. Do you have nudges that help people? Not those alerts that go to email that everybody ignores. Is it an intelligent nudging system using the latest in behavioral economics? Are things existing where you work, right? So usually you've got this different software, sitting somewhere out there on your tabs, maybe on Chrome or Edge, right? Whatever you're using. But what if, it was in Slack and it would just ping you in Slack and you click one button? That's a whole different process than, I've got to remember to sign into blah, blah, blah software, click, 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 click all the way through, versus that little timely reminder in Slack or in Teams, right? And it makes it easy. So it's understanding, some of the level of the problem. And you say, I have a solution. We're doing continuous performance management now. Great first step, but you've got to have that underlying system, so to speak, right? The old saying, you don't rise to the level of motivation. You can have all the best intentions in the world, but you will fall to the level of your system. And having an easy to use, nice UI, integratable, right? And so these nudges happen where people are working, and that's typically nowadays in Teams or in Slack.
Jeff, what are some of the key points that you have found? It's like, hey, this thing's holding us back. We need a new system.
Yeah, I take a more of a sort of a simple approach, to that, because I've seen this, over and over again. As soon as the HR leader and the HR team start to do sort of one of two things. One, we have to do a workaround, for that. Well, the second thing is, I don't think the system can do that, or we're sort of limited, right? So, as soon as you start getting into those conversations about having to do, workarounds, whether using a spreadsheet, which is the most popular thing, right? Or having conversation with your vendor to say, can you do X, Y, and Z? And if the answers are all no, then that you have outgrown that platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you right now.
What are some
So go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what are some of those specific ways that these systems start to fail as you scale?
Yeah, Bob's laughing. So I mean, we could probably go on for about an hour. Basically the hiring in different countries. The system can't even account for the fact that there's different employment rules in laws in various countries. What about the analytics of trying to deal with compensation data? There's so many use cases. Performance management, when you're trying to customize the system to meet your processes, and you can't do that, and it starts to get more complicated. What about onboarding? The onboarding is starting to get manual, and it just becomes this major headache. What about the recruitment system doesn't talk to the HRIS, so you end up doing a double entry, and then on top of that, you have to double enter like into payroll, and then you end up having errors with data, data integrity. I'm just talking about a couple things here, but the thing is in this day and age, there is absolutely no excuse, and I say that with like all caps, no excuse that HR software can't be fully customizable for your business. Absolutely, no excuse today. Now we have AI-powered software, workflows, automation. Software today, you can create workflows, automation, for anything. So, because if you are using a system that is keeping you pigeonholed, then that needs to change.
What about from like a purely human perspective? I think that there's no doubt that a good system allows you to do more work. As William just pointed out in the comments, it allows you to do more strategic work because you're freeing up from these automatable tasks. From my perspective, the wrong system can also, can hurt employer morale. It can lead to confusion, and it can also potentially lead to HR burnout. And I don't know what either of you have seen sort of in practice around how the wrong system can really lead to detrimental culture or just sort of like well-being of employees, either HR or other folks. And conversely, perhaps the right system is kind of working in the opposite direction?
Yeah, I think for me, there hadn't really been sort of any case where I've been sort of managing a team where that's happened, because I always, like end up changing the system or making changes or what have you, but a lot of my peers have. And I think what tends to happen is that, as soon as the amount of volume of the workaround and the headaches and then the constant roadblocks and the constant conversations with vendors, start to happen more and more, then that tension sort of starts, to rise, right? And so, there have been multiple situations where I've had people call me and say, I can't even get people hired because our systems are just breaking down, and it's causing headaches sort of across my business, because managers are getting angry with me because we can't even hire people because of our systems are breaking. So that does lead to a lot of issues, because ultimately HR practitioners want to deliver, and they will try these workaround and to other things. That the time suck is the amount of manual data administration, and that's why we have these new tools today with like AI power, which can literally drop your workload by about 90%. Now, say workload by 90%, the old workload by 90%, right? We can automate all of these things for you. So
what's the old workload? Manual
entry, administration, looking at spreadsheets, making sure that you've got version control. Yes, people still faxing stuff, God knows where. Like, there's all of that manual entry stuff. Onboarding is a huge one. You got a task list of 20 different things for onboarding, and you've got to follow up on every single employee, and you're in high growth mode. Good luck.
Bob, you were just talking about, I know you work with a lot of high growth companies, and perhaps you've seen some of this as well.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. This is real life, and it's composite, right? So I won't say who it is, because like Jeff, I come in to change things. But let's start with this. Onboarding. You look at it, you're looking at the onboarding checklist. Wait for this one, 123 tasks spread out amongst 5 people. Let's just look at some of the HR ones. Oh, I have to, because the ATS is not integrated with the HRIS, I have to manually enter all that information. Great. Oh, and then of course it's not tied into payroll, so they have to manually enter that in again. Oh no, I've got to do insurance, so I've got to go to the health insurance. Wait a minute, that's not all together. I've got to go to a separate area and enter that information for vision. Oh, wait a minute, I've got a separate area for this one for dental. Oh wait, that's not enough. I got to go to another website for a different vendor and tie in their HSA account. I'm having to manually enter the person's name, address, kids, the whole shebang all the way through, over and over and over again. We're hiring 10 people a month, and then right, you could see where this leads to. Now, it's not just them. What about internally? What about our tech stack? What do they have access to, right? So we've got IT people checked in there. We've got finance people. We've got HR people manually, literally in the 2000s, since COVID, or the 2020s, still doing this stuff manually, right, on that side. When you do this, 2 things happen, right? You get, cognitive, load issues, right? Because I'm just like basically a data entry clerk, and it's siloed information, sometimes conflicting. And so, next thing you know, somebody's pay or insurance gets rejected because we put the wrong state in or something like that. How potentially vendors are. So you've got this, issue. So 2 sides. Most important on the, employee experience side, that's not great, right? You join and you literally, your Chrome, just for your HR, pieces, you've got like 10 tabs that you've saved, and you have to enter in all these different pieces. From an HR point of view, it's a huge cognitive load, which leads to decision fatigue, which leads to errors, right? We're only human as well. So you can see how these things compound, right? And then you get stuck in trying to keep up on that hamster wheel. And imagine like what we're talking about here, and you know it can be done in a better way, but you don't have enough time for that transition, right? So it's almost a vicious cycle that you're stuck into. You're too busy entering manual data to then identify what new system would be to help out. But this is why we're here today, and in how to get out of it, right? And it's just breaking free and saying, okay, using folks like yourself, hey, can I short circuit this? Can I do a quick evaluation, 1, 2, 3, build a business case, and kind of like shakes you out of that cycle that you're stuck into.
I'm gonna, as mentioned, we're using Webinar Geek for the first time ever, and I'm gonna do something that I've never done before, which is to click Start Live Answer. Brianna asks an awesome question. Thank you, Brianna. How would you combat the issue of the devil you know is better than the devil you don't? So she's using ADP, and it doesn't come through all the time. We all hear many complaints about ADP probably every week. If I switch to Rippling or another provider, I'm doing all this migration just to have issues I don't know how to solve. And there's a risk basically of replatforming. How do you all think about that risk of, hey, this is good enough, it's kind of a pain in the neck, it doesn't do a lot of stuff I wanted to do, but I don't know if Rippling is going to be better?
If I may, there's a couple things. One is, I always ask people this question: which risk is greater, doing nothing or doing something, but changing? Right? That's the first question, but you can't answer that question yet until you answer this question, which is part of the problem is most HR people, when we're looking at software, focus on looking at the actual software first. They go straight to the tools. They're like, you know what? We need a new HR system. We're just gonna, I'm gonna talk to a bunch of my peers, and I'm just gonna make a list, and we're just gonna demo. Okay. The problem with that is that you haven't done the hard work first, which is, understanding some of your sort of core challenges. What's your business strategy? Are you in growth mode? Are you in, flatlining mode? Are you, thumbs up. Are you, looking at scaling? Are you trying to do cost containment? What is the core business supposed to do in the short term, and also near sort of short term, longer term? Okay. Once you have answers to those questions, then you can then make a better assessment. You can say to yourself, and then go through the actual checklist to say, can our current system help us, deliver on all of this? And I'll add like a weighting to each of the criteria, if you want to. You add a weighting to it, and you rank them out of 10. You can go through that with, your entire team. And if at the end of all of this, you say, what, the risk at doing nothing is so severe that we have to do something, then you've got your answer. If your answer is, well, what, yeah, maybe it might be better to have something, but based on what our strategy is, today and our challenges, it might be best not to explore now, right? So, but you need to go through that process first. But I can tell you right now that I think there's 1,000,001 tools that are better than the one that you're using right now. Sorry.
Yeah, and I would even say, from my perspective, like, I don't know if the bar should be quite as high as we kind of have to do this, because I think, to your point, like, there are a lot of better tools out there, and the risk of moving to one of those is probably not as high, maybe, Brianna, as you're worried about. Rob, I saw you writing a few things down, maybe some ideas, maybe your grocery list. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so basically what I tend to do is front end load things. So instead of looking at a system, I look at our internal pain points and I create an RFP. And I get asked, like, why have you implemented over 10 different applicant tracking systems? Are you nuts? Like, why don't you just implement what you did before? You obviously were successful, so just use blah, blah, blah again. Use Greenhouse, use Lever, use JobVite, just use them again. No, you got to be careful here, right? What's a better system? Well, it depends who you are. And so if you do an RFP and you start from the needs of the business, the problems you're trying to solve, it is highly likely, in my case, because I do this over and over again, I do digital transformation, you're going to pick a different solution almost every time, right? Because you've got that criteria for that business and that time, matching their strategic needs. And so if you front end load it, again, you're going to find a product rather than a better one generically. You can find one that meets your needs, which is more important than the global definition of better. And so then you get into the second piece, and this is little details, but this is gold. And I've learned this the hard way. When you ask for referrals from those companies, right? Give them a set of questions for your pain points. And then when you talk to those folks, even though they've been chosen by the company, right, because they have a good relationship, if you have your pain point questions ahead of time and even send it to these folks, I find they're brutally honest. And they're like, yeah, it's a great company, but we had this little hiccup when we tried to implement it, but this is how they fixed it. And now here's where we are today. And so for a question like Brianna, I would get like 3, 4, 5 different folks that they work with as referrals and dig into some of your own pain points and have them answer questions. I've never been in a situation where it's like, oh no, it's horrible. No, I'm forewarned and forearmed, right? So I know, okay, this is not their strength. I'll fill in that gap with a change manager, or I'm going to borrow somebody from finance to help out with this little tweak piece on their compensation scenario planning, right? Where I don't have it, and 2 or 3 of their referrals who were happy with them said, yeah, this was a hiccup. So it's a little bit on those two sides. So front end load it, and then when you get towards the end, really ask the hard questions. Like I said, didn't change my mind. There was no negative repercussions. It solidified it though that these people are great. They're flexible. They're problem solvers. And so it more or less reinforced it by that honesty that things were not going to be easy.
Awesome. Great answer. I'm going to share my screen again. And thank you both for the answers. Thank you, Brianna, for the question. And thank you, Ruby, for pointing out that the question was covering Jeff's face, because I thought maybe that was only on my screen. And it's good to know these things when you're using a new platform. So I know a lot of folks out there are looking for a new system, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, but there's actually a team of advisors that you can use for free to get help understanding which solutions you should be looking at. So Brianna, moving off ADP, looking at Rippling, depending on your size of company, your budget, features, functionality, that can be a really good tool to look at. There's probably a few others if you're looking at for them to look at others. And to be honest with you, we talk to companies that they bought an amazing HRIS, but for the wrong size company. Like Bob, for example, hi Bob, the vendor, not the Bob on the call today, is a phenomenal HRIS in my opinion, but not if you're a 50-person company. And we talked to somebody a few weeks ago who made that decision, unfortunately, and it can be tough. And so we have this free advisory service. You talk to one of our advisors, we'll match you with the right tools. And this is for HRIS. It's also for ATS, payroll, EOR, LMS, performance, et cetera. And then they really can be your concierge throughout the process. You want to understand, are you getting a good deal? Your CFO's being a pain, et cetera. And so you can scan that QR code, or I'll just drop a link into the chat if you want to book a time with one of these advisors. It's totally free. It's very fast, and it's rated 4.9 stars. We work with companies ranging from MIT to the Indianapolis Colts to Chip City to Frank and Eileen to many, many other brands that we're very lucky. We actually got our second NFL team with the Miami Dolphins. I wish, I'm up in Boston. I wish we got the Patriots, but for whatever reason, we now have like 10% of the NFL. We also have a special kind of offer for folks on the call. If you book a call, use the advisors, get recommendations, we'll give you a $50 gift card just as kind of a thank you for your time. And the best part of running this business is this is stressful. And it kind of reminds me of when I was like shopping for engagement rings, and I probably spent 100 hours becoming like a diamond expert. And I wish there was just like a person who I could have been like, here's my budget. Here's what my partner cares about. Tell me what to buy. It's the same thing when you're buying an HRIS. You shouldn't spend 100 hours becoming an expert. Just go use one of our advisors and they'll point you in the right direction and really help you out. And yeah, please all spread the word about this because we love helping folks. And if there's somebody in your network who's having trouble, send them our way. So I also wanted to just kind of dive back in to our discussion here. And one thing that I was curious about was, what do each of you think is a good high-level process for buying a new HRIS, kind of timeline and key steps? And maybe, Jeff, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
We kind of talked a bit about this already, I think in the last couple of questions, but in terms of a process, I mean, ultimately, Bob might feel, differently, but I've primarily worked with sort of smaller companies. So I think obviously the larger the organization, the longer that it's going to probably take because you have more, stakeholders involved. But having said that, I think it's really important that you go through the various steps of, really being crystal clear on the pain point. What is your business strategy? Like, what are the 3-4 things? And then what is your HR strategy? Get those things really down on paper, because I think that will give you a lot of clarity as to what you really need to do. Like, as all of you know, I mean, HR is such a broad area. You can have an HRIS. I don't know of any HRISs that can capture or do every little part and subpart of HR well. So oftentimes you've got a couple of solutions that sort of work in tandem, but you don't know what those are until you go through that process. I also align things with budget cycles too. So most of the companies that I've worked for, typically gone through their planning or started planning in the summer, the late summer, early fall, and then by the end of the year they would have a fully fleshed out business strategy, and then all of the various departments have their plan, and then that leads that into budget for the following year. So I think it's important, for you, for HR to really align yourself to those cycles, because if you're starting in like now, even May, and budgets are not allocated until the end of the year, then you're sort of missing out on the time frame. There's no reason for this to be a long process, honestly. I think in today's world, with the access to data, information, insights sort of at your fingertips via AI, you should be able to go through this process fairly quickly. Now, in terms of demos, my suggestion on that front, so once you are ready to start looking at tools, is to get all the demos all very, very close to each other, because people forget what they do and they forget certain things. And if you're looking at, say, 5 platforms, I would demo them all over 2 days, 3 days, whatever, vacation, maybe keep it really short. And so that, and then you obviously have that sort of in your mind. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think keep it as short as possible. Sort of align it to budget cycles. I've gone through the process in 2 weeks. So after I've been able to, this is after I got my business strategy, we know exactly what's going on. We've done our HR strategy. We start looking at headcount. We start looking at growth or no growth. And I'm crystal clear on my sort of core objective. Then I analyze my pain points as to what my current system, as to what they do well at, what they don't do well at. And then I sort of flag those. Then I'm now ready to sort of go ahead and, go through that process. Quicker the better. The research shows that the longer you sort of wait on a final choice, you're not going to get any more value out of it.
So Jeff, maybe you've got the fastest HRIS buy that I've heard of. Somebody that we helped on an ATS, and I think it was like 3 days. They'd actually been looking for 8 months, and they just hadn't found the right platform. And we introduced them to a company that was just like the best fit, and they bought it, which was crazy. But it's nice. We got Bob with the biggest number, Jeff with the fastest. Great panel.
Don't forget though, I mean, 2 weeks it is not really accurate if you're like
after a lot of pre-work.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, if you're a multinational, where it's like 100,000 employees, that's not going to happen in 2 weeks. So I'm just saying, in my world, when I worked with tech companies, anywhere from from 100 employees up to 1,000, that was a sweet spot. We could probably do it fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, I think it's reasonable, to be honest with you. You just got to have your ducks in a row. I don't know, Bob, if you have anything to add. That was a pretty comprehensive answer.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, to support Jeff in this, like back in the day, a whole 15 years ago, right? I'm not exaggerating. I put together like 50-page business cases for this, right? And you had all the structure, and we ended up here. And then, I started working for startups, and started looking at pitch decks, and I was like, well, this would fit. So all of a sudden, I'm going from a 50-page template. I'm sure you remember downloading those in 2008, 2012, 13, right? Remember those business case things for HR software? They're like 50, 100 pages long if you filled in everything. Switch to a pitch deck, 10 slides, man. You start with the problem statement. You got your data. What's the strategic importance of that? We both talked about that, right? Opportunities, goals, right? It's not, oh, our system sucks. It's, or our system's okay. It's, we're not optimized to deliver these results. Current state analysis. Here's what we got. Proposed solution. Hey, we're going to go with this. Vendor shortlist. We choose one of these. Here's the ROI. And then we risk and mitigation. And then here's the schedule. 10 slides. So you can see, Phil, your point, right? We've gone from that, let's do this, and methodically, and have like the big thick, with business case with, appendices, to 10-page deck. That's it, and folks manage to raise, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions with these 10-page pitch decks. Why can't we get a new HRIS approved with the same framework? I don't think we should be overcomplicating it. And then you get to the point where you want to be, which is, how do we intelligently do this in a structured format that gives the executives everything they need and provides us with a roadmap? It's much quicker. Again, learn that the hard way.
It's good epiphany. Thanks for sharing your learnings from the trenches. We all don't have to put together 50-page pitch decks. Speaking of business cases, Matt asked a great question, which is, and I'm going to click live answer and hopefully like move this up. No, I can't move it. So I'm going to not hide Jeff's face. How do you quantify the amount of manager time spent on administrative tasks? Often in HRM, which Matt is using HRM to refer to HRIS, HCM, kind of the same thing, is seen by managers as adding to that, when the fact is there are hidden time sucks, like disjointed manual tasks that get alleviated by an HRM. Can be a tough to articulate and show in an ROI. Do you have any thoughts on how to articulate this, how to calculate this?
So I'm going to take a less scientific approach, which is probably going to, sort of annoy Bob. But this is not a perfect exercise, right? So this isn't meant to be down to like the actual minute or second or hour, right? The idea here is that you're ballparking this. So you can say, look, I take onboarding, for example. For every new hire, I may spend approximately 10 hours a week. But 10 hours in total dealing with this employee and the onboarding only. And then we're hiring, X amount of people, so you can start to calculate that over time. Now, and then you obviously have that sort of eats away at your full-time hours. So, if you work 40 hours a week, then you know how much, time that you're getting taken up by this manual entry. Give or take maybe a couple hours either way. Now, what if you said, so you start looking at your role and you say, what if I could shorten my administration effort by, say, 20%? So what does that look like? And then you start to calculate it that way. Then you can start going to some of the tools and to say, look, our primary goal here is to reduce the amount of manual entry that we do across our business, from across our HR team, doing things like onboarding, which is the biggest time suck. Maybe it's our performance management. That also is a huge time suck. And so then you can start to sort of see, okay, so this is current state, ballpark. This is how much time, and by investing in this solution, we then free up approximately this many hours of our time every week, and then you times that by all of the people that actually do that work, and you start to see the big picture here. And then you go, okay, so say we do this. Now what can we have these people doing, right? And that's when you start getting into some of the things that the strategy part of things, where person A over here hasn't been able to get to these things because they are sucked into all of the manual entry. That to me is sort of the high level approach, what I would take. And I've done this many times before, and it doesn't. I mean, obviously, like human beings are all different, so it may take me a little bit longer to do something than Bob. I might be faster than Phil, but you're looking at more of a high level approach, but you are working with actual numbers.
Bob, do you have a more granular way of looking at it, or is that kind of how you think about it as well?
I think about it within that framework, but then Jeff's done like a great job, like at that, like the high medium level. Let me drill down, right, with a specific example. Applicant tracking system, managers reviewing resumes, right? So let's just say, oh yeah, we don't have a recruiter. It's a technical job. The manager's got to go through it. Let's just say your average example, 500 resumes. Okay, on average, 2.5 minutes a piece to go through 500 resumes. And so you're looking at 21 hours, right, to go through 500 resumes. And so you can see the management time involved in that. What if we got a slightly better ATS that basically, allow us to slice and dice, ask the right questions? Again, be very careful here. I'm not saying AI knocking anybody out and doing this analysis. It's process, it's automation, using a little bit of AI. It's not making decisions. It's helping us with the process, narrowing it down to say 20 resumes, right? So you're looking at 21 hours dropping down to an hour, right? So right away you got 20 hours. That's for one position, one manager at that one step. And you start layering these on and saying, oh, because this ATS is more flexible, I could ask pre-screening questions, and based on the person's answers, not some AI, then I can go ahead and rank them. So you can see like right away, one position, one manager, one step in the process, 20 hours saved, right? And you just keep layering. Oh, we hire 100 people a year. Our average salary for manager is 100,000. So, we're saving, this amount per hour. You can say it's like $52 an hour, whatever the case is, right? And then multiply it out all the way through and say, well, a good ATS is about $8,000, and we're looking at saving almost 100,000 in manager time.
I'm going to start a poll right now, asking folks, how many HR tools do you buy in a given year? And I don't know, from each of your perspectives, just quickly, what are you looking at? And maybe there's like tools like HRIS, ATS, performance management, and then there's also like a secondary answer, which is like vendors. So it's like, software plus, we got an L&D consultant, we got a recruiting operations person, et cetera. I don't know, like just quick answer off the top of your guys' head, kind of ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, I could start there. I will say, my bias is, and I'll qualify this, my bias is for an HR tech stack with best in breed, right? So really focus on, again, like Jeff and I have been saying, strategy, what's really important. And that's where you kind of put in your extra investment, right? So if you're on a growth spurt, like having like a totally killer ATS is super helpful, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than a minimized one and all in one, right? If that's your priority, then invest in a really great ATS and then move things down the line, so to speak. And I always ask people, right, because typically they pay per employee per month, which is what can you go up to? And if you can pay $28 and say, okay, this one costs you $4 per person per month, this one costs you this, right? And you build out that stack. Now, that's for the HR side in terms of me getting the outcomes I need for the business. It's a bit of a different story. What I try to do to alleviate some of that from the employee experience point of view is then have an intranet that these are baked into, right? So you go to like an HR hub, and on the right-hand side, it's like, oh, you want to refer somebody, click here. If you're a manager, you want to request a new position, right? So try to architect it so that you have this best in breed HR stack, but you're not annoying the bejesus out of your employees by having to click through all these folders at the top. And it's sitting in one page, and it's set by their hierarchy. So ATS for employees is refer someone. ATS for managers is request a position. So that's the way I kind of look at it, from employee experience and then making sure I have the product that delivers against the business strategy.
So maybe is the answer 1 to 3 systems per year, and then maybe like 1 to 3 consultants?
Correct. And then companies evolve, right? So sometimes when you systematize it, it's a little bit hero effort in the beginning, and then you systematize it and you're able to roll it in. So, one organization, we grew from about 80 to 1,200 people in 2.5 years. And so, our products evolved at that point. And once people were trained and got used to the product, I was able to shift to a more all-in-one, right? Because I didn't have to have like the best, the greatest, the most complex. People were already rolling with it and comfortable. But that organization towards that end, right, is about retention and learning and development. All my money and time went into L&D consultants and, at that point, LMS/LXP, right? And so you just follow the evolution and you devolve a little bit of your investment in the best in breed, maybe then start to, coalesce around I won't call it all in one, but most in one, and then still pick your battle. So I dropped we had a great ATS, I dropped it, went to Bamboo, kind of like all in one-ish, but I needed an absolutely stellar LMS in 2 years, right? So it's a pretty big shift.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. I think things have changed quite a bit in the last, I would say, about 1.5 to 2 years, and I think that's largely driven by the explosion of AI. So how we think about HR software, which nowadays can be termed work software, work tech, right? So, because back in the day, we're talking maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, well, probably longer than that. HR tech meant your HR software, recruiting software, payroll, performance management, that kind of thing. And it was still modular based. Now, all of the other tools like social collaboration, whether it be through, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google, all of those things, that's called work tech. But is it really HR tech? Because you're touching everybody, right? So, but the other thing too, now with AI, so how we think about building HR tech stacks, we can do it in a hyper customized way. And so those solutions, those legacy solutions like a Workday, for example, make it really difficult for you to hyper customize things that unless you have lots of money. Then you sort of create a project and then you sort of do things. But nowadays, with the ease and hyper flexibility of software with workflow automations and so on, really how we think about building out stuff like that, it changes. So to Bob's point, if a company is a startup or a smaller organization of about 100 employees, not really growing, the more focused on cost containment, then obviously sort of how you invest in software is very different than if you're going through from an 80 to a 2,000 employee organization.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that the future is investing in one vendor for an all-in-one solution. Those days are gone. And if you are still doing that, I think you are missing out on a huge opportunity, because Workday will never, be able to do everything well. Same with like SAP and other companies too. So, and I've seen dozens upon dozens of solutions just in the last 6 months alone that are changing the game. So, and they're all hyper focused on AI power, hyper flexible automation, workflows, automation type software. So.
We're kind of running up against time, so we're going to do a couple of things fairly quickly. One is the networking. So thank you for everybody who's held off on sharing your LinkedIn profile. If you want to share your LinkedIn profile with others via the chat, now's the time to do it. It's basically an open invitation to network, say, hey, connect with me. I would connect with 2, 3, 4, 5 people. You're probably going to get folks who are also looking at a new HRIS, and maybe you can share some war stories, share some different best practices, vendors that you're looking at, etc. And yeah, would love to just kind of see folks drop those in. And again, it's sort of an open invitation. It's really nice. We've had people, get jobs through these networking sessions, etc. Speaking of jobs, also put we do have a job board, peopleopsjobs.io, that I'll throw in there. If you're hiring for your team, happy to give you a code to post a free job as well. So wanted to get the networking in there, and thanks everybody for the abundance mindset and sharing your LinkedIn profiles. It's awesome to see that, and hopefully you get some good connections out of it. Please definitely let us know if some good connections come from it. We're going to share this over email as well, but I'm going to put a link to our sessions takeaway doc in the chat here. It's going to have resources, things that we've talked about today, some of the highlights, and it's just a great thing to have in your back pocket if you're looking for an HRIS. And we will also update it with some of the key points from today's topics. We also have a couple of webinars coming up. One is on scaling HR, people ops, HR tech strategies for SMBs and startups, as well as recruitment marketing for Gen Z. They'll both be phenomenal webinars. So please join those. Sorry, I didn't put the actual link in there. So that's the one to join for smarter scaling. And then this is the one to join for recruitment marketing for Gen Z. So we hope to see you on those webinars as well. Here's the QR code again, if you're interested in booking that time with an HR tech advisor. I'll also put the calendar link into the chat one more time here. And what I'll also do is launch a feedback poll that we love to get feedback on these webinars. We want to make them better and better and better. We do 2 or 3 a month. And so please let us know how we did today. Send us an email, send me a LinkedIn message. Please connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know topics that you think we should cover. Anything we can do to make this community better. Would love to get your thoughts. I think we might have time maybe for one more question. And I guess I might selfishly actually steal this question to launch yet another poll, because I actually am really curious, and you can feel free to drop it in the chat as well. Where else are you getting your HR information from? Is it from SHRM? Is it from your local HR community? Is it from LinkedIn? Is it from Reddit? Is it from a Slack group? Would just really love to see where people are getting their information. SHRM and HRCI. Not super surprised, given especially you get this SHRM credit from being on the webinar. But yeah, feel free to drop in the chat any amazing resources that you found. We're always looking to partner with other like-minded communities. And with that, Jeff and Bob, thank you guys so much for joining the webinar. It's been a great discussion. You both, combined, I guess, have 50 plus experiences, many implementations, many buying cycles, the things that you've learned, sometimes the hard way. And we just really appreciate everything you have added to our community today. So thank you so much. And to everybody in the webinar, thank you for joining us, spending an hour with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, everybody.